wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Today we are going to do a presentation about discourse grammar for discourse analysis subject. First, let me introduce me and my team. First, me, Dwi Putri Marsala Mufti, as the first speaker and as the moderator. Second is Siti Nuryani, and the third is Ulfa Fitri Utami, and the fourth is Wira Aditya. The second slide, please. So the contents of our presentation is tujuan pembahasan, konten bab, and manfaat pembahasan bab. The second slide, please. Purpose of material discussion. First, general purposes. A. To identify the discourse analysis in grammar. B. To broaden insight and knowledge related to the discourse grammar. Second, special purposes. A. To know and understand grammar from a discourse perspective. B. To know and understand about the texture of a text, cohesion and discourse, reference, lexical cohesion, collocation, conjunction, substitution, and ellipsis, sample analysis, theme and rhyme, and thematic progression. C. To understand about attitudes and grammar and engagement, and grammatical differences between spoken and written discourse. Next slide, please. Benefits of discussion. First, general benefit. A can be a source of reference for students and teachers. B can be a reference source for readers in general. C can add insight into the discourse grammar. Second, special benefits. The preparation of this chapter report has special benefits, namely, A can know and understand grammar from a discourse perspective. B can find out in detail about the texture of a text, cohesion and discourse, reference, lexical cohesion, collocation, conjunction, substitution, and ellipsis, sample analysis, theme and rhyme, and thematic progression. C can understand about attitude and grammar and engagement, and grammatical differences between spoken and written discourse. Next slide, please. Contents. Grammar from a discourse perspective. The texture of the text, cohesion and discourse, reference, lexical cohesion, collocation, conjunction, substitution, and ellipsis, patterns of cohesion, ensemble analysis, theme and rhyme, thematic progression, attitude and grammar and engagement, grammatical differences between spoken and written discourse. Next slide. Number of linguistic items such as it, this, and that have been shown to have quite different patterns of use when looked at from a discourse rather than a sentence perspective. MC Carty found that it often signals reference to a continuing or ongoing topic in a text rather than just something inside or outside the text, as more traditional explanation might suggest. The next slide, please. The texture of a text. Hassan discusses two crucial attributes of text and which are important for the analysis of discourse. These are unity of structure and unity of texture. Unity of structure refers to patterns which combine together to create information structure, focus, and flow in a text, including the schematic structure of the text. The next slide, please. Cohesion and discourse, an area of language in which grammar and discourse are highly integrated, is in patterns of cohesion in text. The main patterns of cohesion are reference, lexical cohesion, conjunction, substitution, and ellipsis. Next slide, please. Reference refers to the situation where the identity of an item can be retrieved from either with within or outside the text. The main reference patterns are enophoric, cataphoric, exaphoric, and homophoric reference. And the next material will be delivered by Yani. So Yani, it's your time. Next slide, please.
Okay, thanks, moderator. So, in this time, I will explain about the lexical question at the first material. Lexical cohesion refer to relationship in the meaning between lexical item in a text and in particular contents, word, and the relationship between them. And the main kind of lexical cohesion are repetition, synonymy, antonymy, hyponymy, meronymy, and collocation. Uh, repetition refer to words that are repeated in the text. This includes words which are inflected for tense or number and words which are derived from particular items such as store and store. Synonymy Synonymy refer to words which are similar in the meaning such as that and go out in the above example and blocks and men. Antonymy describe oversight or contractive meaning such as sign and forward in the allied text and woman and men, real prayers and both. Hyponymy and meronymy. Halde 1990 described the kind of lexical taxonomies that typically occur in text, superordinate, and competition. There are words which are a kind of relationship with each other, ordination, and words that are in the Wolfart relationship with each other, composition. In the previous tag, Jen and Stuart are part of the lexical item couple where he does not get into you in this kind of self-help book. And the relationship between Jen and couple is the example of meronymy. And the relationship between self-help book and he just not that into you is one of hyponymy. Hyponymy. Hyponymy then refers to classes of lexical items where the relationship between them is one of general specific. An example of a class two member type relationship. Meronymy. Meronymy is where lexical items are in the whole two part relationship with each other, such as the relationship between Jen and Stuart in relationship to the item couple. Collocation. Collocation describes association between vocabulary items which have a tendency to assure such as combination of adjective and noun. Next, lexical balance. Lexical balance multi-word combinations such as a result of on the other hand, if we look at the as can be seen the issues in genre such as university textbook. Next, conjunction. Uh, a further way in which language contributes to the texture of the text is through the use of conjunction. Conjunction refer to words such as and, however, finally, and the conclusion that join phrases, clauses, or section of a text in such as a way that they express a logical semantic relationship between them. They are a very important part of the discourse knowledge that both speaker and written and readers and listener draw on as they both product and interpret spoken and written discourse. Subtension and ellipsis. A picture when in which texture is achieved in a text is through the use of subtension and ellipse. Subtension. With subtension, a subtension form is used for another language item phrasal group, it can involve subtitling an item for a noun. Ellipsis with the ellipsis, some essential element in omitted from the text and can be recovered by referring to a preceding element in the text. Ellipsis may involve the omission for a noun or noun group, a verb or verbal group, or clauses. The last material is differences between reference, ellipsis, and subtension. It is important to find out differences between references and ellipsis subtension. One difference is that reference can reach a long way back in the text, whereas ellipsis and subtension are larger in limitation to the immediately preceding clause. Another can difference is that with reference, there is a typical meaning of references, that is, both items typically refer to the same thing with ellipsis and substitution. This is not the case. There is always some difference between the second instance at the first. If a speaker or writer want to refer to the same thing, they use reference. If they want to refer to something different, they use ellipsis substitution. Holiday 1995. Maybe that's enough for me. Back to moderator.
Okay, so the next material will be delivered by Wira. So Wira, it's your time, please.
Okay, thanks and advice to moderator who has given me the time. Okay, I will continue uh, the explanation for today's material. The next material is a pattern of cohesion, a sample analysis. Here, I have the example of Milne's book. Okay, I will read it first. The paragraph of the example. Here is Edward Beer coming downstairs now. Bam, bam, bam on the back of his head behind Christopher Robin. It is as far as he knows, the only way of coming downstairs. But sometimes he feels that there really is another way. If only he could stop bumping for a moment and think of it. And then he feels perhaps there isn't. Anyhow, here he is at the bottom and ready to be introduced to you. Winnie the Pooh. So, uh, the first example, as can be seen in figure 6 and 6, here there are three main lexical uh, chain in this section of the text. The first is the subject of the text, Winnie the Pooh, and the second is the staircase, and the third is the way in which Winnie the Pooh comes down the stairs. Winnie the Pooh's formal name is Edward Beer. This is what he is called the first time he is mentioned in the text. The next item is head. Head is in a thoughtful relationship with Edward Beer. This is head is part of a beer. In this case, Edward Beer. The relationship the relationship between these two items thus is one of meronymy. The relationship between Winnie the Pooh and Head is exactly the same. Meronymy, in order to understand this relationship, It is essential for the reader to realize that Edward Weir and Winnie the Pooh are the same person. This relationship is made clear at the end of the first paragraph, where Edward Beer's informal name is present to the reader. Winnie the Pooh, the relationship between his name and Winnie the Pooh, same of naming. Okay, and the next, the second example in figure 6 and 7, the second lexical chain in the text contains as example of repetition and meronymy. The bottom of the stairs is in a whole part relationship with the general area downstairs, as can be seen in 6 and 7 figure. Here, there are four main reference chains in this section of the text. In the first chain, once the item Edward beer in is present, all the other reference item in this chain, his and he. His and he are example of anaphoric reference. That is, they all refer back to Edward Beer. In the second chain, the first is referred to coming downstairs on the back of his head. This is an example of full text referencing. It is referring to a section of the text up to this point. Another way makes a comparison with coming downstairs on the back of his head. So it's an example of comparative reference. The next item in the chain, it refers to another way. In the back of his head, the is an example of aphoric reference. That is, the item it refers to immediate follows in the same uh, nominal group. The third and fourth reference chain in this text are a little more complex for reader to follow. The reader needs to know who the you being referred to in the text is. And the next material is theme and rhyme. Two further elements that contribute to the texture of the text is the relationship between theme and rhyme in a clause, and its contribute to the focus and flow on information in a text. Theme is the element which serves as the point of departure of the message. This by said holiday. Uh, it also introduced information prominence into the clause. For example, on the table 6 and 2, theme and rhyme. Theme is the genre, and the rhyme is the theme term in widespread use to indicate an approach to communicate with emphasize social function and purpose. And the rhyme is what the clause has to say about the theme, what has to say about genre. An example of a textual theme and can be seen in the final sentence of the text. So in table 6 and 3, where but joins two clauses together. The rest of the themes in this extract are topical themes. And then here, theme and rhyme, there are two kinds. The first, there is interpersonal theme. Interpersonal theme refer to an item that comes before the rhyme, which indicates the relationship between participant in the text or the position or point of view that is being taken in the class. We can see in the table 6 and the 4. And the second kind, there is multiple theme. The extract in table 6 and 5 from the review of his just not that into you source and further example of textual interpersonal and topical theme. It is example of multiple theme. And the next material is thematic progression or method of development of text. Thematic progression refers to the way in which the theme of a clause may pick up or repeat a meaning from a preceding theme and or rhyme. The first constant theme. One example of thematic progression is theme reiteration or constant theme. In this pattern, theme 1 is pick up and repeat and to beginning of the next clause, signaling that each clause will have something to say about the theme. And the second, there is linear theme. It is another common pattern of thematic progression is when the subject matter in the rhyme of one clause is taken up in the theme of a following clause. And the last, there is multiple theme or split rhyme. Text may equally include other kinds of progression such as the multiple theme or split rhyme pattern. In multiple theme or split rhyme progression, a rhyme may include a number of different phases of information, each of which may be taken up as the theme in a number of subsequent clauses. Maybe that's the end my explanation. Thanks in report. I will back to moderator.
Will be delivered to Ulfa. To Ulfa, now it's your time.
Okay, thank you. Here I want to explain about attitude and grammar. Attitude is the way writers and speakers evaluatively position themselves towards an item by paying attention to their relationship with other people, what they believe, how they feel, and what they know. So, an item may be evaluated differently by different people depending on their background, such as social culture and others, which allows the item to have multiple meanings. So, attitude here can refer to the resources used to make use to make an evaluation of a phenomenon either positively or negatively. Then, attitude assessment theory is divided into three. There are influence, assessment, and appreciation, which can be expressed explicitly through the use of individual lexical items or implicitly through the process of implicator. So, sometimes the attitude expressed is not clear because it is not directly expressed in a text and conclusion may be needed from the context in which the text appears. Next slide, please. Political sources are also used to express engagement which aims to incorporate and adapt attitude towards the words, observation, beliefs, and point of view of others. Then, the main way engagement is expressed is through attribution, modality, disclaimer, and proclamation. Well, attribution here is where someone refers to words, views, or thought from sources or other people which they indirectly evaluate, so that the material is relevant by showing support for the material or endorsement, not supporting the material or this endorsement, or neutral about the material or non-endorsement. And next, modality is using model items to express certainty, habit, or possibility. And then disclaimer is when they can reject outside sources in order to replace with something else. And the last is proclaimers is when they present the material in such a way that is difficult for others to challenge it. Next slide, please. Okay, here is the grammatical differences between spoken and written discourse. Well, there are a number of grammatical differences between spoken and written language, which have implication for discourse analysis. So for the first is grammatical intricacy and spoken and written discourse. Well, as we know, the general view around us is that writing is structurally more complex and complicated than spoken. However, many argue that spoken also has its own kind of complexity. For example, the relationship between clauses in spoken discourse can be far more scattered and more complex relationship. However, it can still be maintained. And then for the second is lexical density in spoken and written discourse. Well, written discourse tends to be lexical denser than spoken discourse. Lexical density refers to the ratio of contents words to grammatical or function words in a clause. So, content words here is includes noun and verbs, while grammar words includes items such as preposition, pronouns, article, and others. And then in the content of spoken discourse, words tend to be spread over a number of clauses rather than tightly packed into individual clauses, which are more typical of written discourse. And then the third one is nominalization and grammatical metaphor in written and spoken discourse. So here, in written text, there is a high degree of nominalization when action and event are presented as nouns, not as a verb, not as a verbs. Written text also usually include longer groups of nouns than spoken text. This leads to a situation where information in the text is more tightly packed into fewer words and is less scattered than in spoken text. And then for the last is a continuum of differences between spoken and written discourse. Well, here is no simple one-dimensional differences between spoken and written discourse. These differences are most usefully viewed as a scale or continuum, and the notion of a spoken to written scale or continuum aims to avoid oversimplifying the distinction between spoken and written, while still highlighting the main areas in which spoken and written discourse. So they can still be distinguished. Well, I think enough for me. Back again to the moderator.
Okay, that's all the material that we delivered. That's the end of our presentation. I as the moderator, permit to end this presentation. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.